What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video over here on YouTube. Today I'm going to jump into the 10 biggest hands that I've won at the VIP games on GG Poker in the last couple of months. I will also make an episode where I show you the 10 biggest hands that I lost at the VIP games as well. So this episode, I will be lucky, I will be blessed, I will have the run good. Next episode, not so much. Okay, so don't be mad, don't be angry. Yes, I will be very lucky in some of these hands, but sometimes I'm also skillful. So without further ado, let's jump into the action. First hand, we're playing 50-100. So basically the VIP tables on GG Poker are $25, $50 blinds upwards. And we will look into hands between 25-50 and 100-200 in this episode because these are the stakes that I'm playing. There are also bigger games on GG. So this is the first hand, ace 9-4-3. This is not a hand you generally want to call in a spot like this. It's usually not good enough if you play against three players. Like, they have better hands too much. And even though we have a suited ace, the connectivity in our hand is really marginal. A quick look into PLO Trainer. You can find out more about this app on PLOtrainer.app. We have GG Poker ranges for high stakes over here. If you look into an MP Open, cutoff calls, small blind calls, and then our strategy in the big blind, we're only going to defend about 20% of the hands. And this ace 9-4-3 single suited nuts is a hand that wants to fold. And if we fold, or when we fold, we lose one big blinds, which is the big blind we put in the middle. And therefore you see the EV is -1, and the alternative is the call, and the EV of that is going to be -1.23. So it's actually it's a pretty thin situation. Like, you can make arguments for making a call like this because the EV difference between calling and folding isn't too large. And if you think you have a decent edge on one or multiple players in the hand, then it might be an okay defend. So I think calling here is okay. We have some aggressive players in the pot. We have some action players in the pot. And I flop here a bottom pair and a gut shot. But that's not actually that important. What's more important in this situation is that this is a board that's very tough to hit for the players that are cold calling here before the flop, because they usually have high cards. And even if they do end up calling the flop with something like an overpair and a gutter, I also have equity against those hands holding a gut shot and a pair and a backdoor nut flush draw. And this was a board that actually the big blind is going to hit a lot better than all the other ranges. We're going to have 6-6, deuce-deuce, and 3-3 a lot more often than the callers and the razor, as well as the straight. So it's a good board to lead out on and apply pressure. As far as sizing is concerned, I don't think we have to go super large. We can go something like a third and apply a lot of pressure. And the reason we apply a lot of pressure is not only because of the sizing. I mean, it's mainly not because of the sizing. It's more because of the multi-way dynamic. If Gallagher here to my left sees a 1/3 pot size sizing, like, he has to consider the other two players behind as well. And therefore, you can sandwich people pretty well by using a small sizing. So I like my sizing. I think choosing this hand is a little bit dicey, even though I was mentioning it's a good board to lead. In general, you preferably have hands that can make the nuts on the turn. So for example, a gut shot or two pair or a set. Especially I have a gut shot as well, but especially a nut gut shot where you feel really comfortable on some of the turns. This hand in particular is not comfortable on any turn. That's a little bit of a problem when it comes to leading ranges. Anyway, we bet and we get called by the cutoff. Cutoff can definitely have like king, 7-5, for example, at this point. King, 6-7. Could have a hand like 8-7, 6-5. So there are definitely plenty of hands that I can still beat, especially on this turn, obviously. And now, as we have trips, what are we going to do? I think I decided to check. And I think on this turn, we can certainly justify betting as well. It's a really good turn for me. I'm going to have 6-3. I'm going to have 6-6, deuce-deuce, deuce-3. Like, I will have these combos a lot more often than my opponent in terms of preflop ranges. So betting, I think, is the standard. Thing, though, is if my opponent is very aggressive, we could also think about checking. I don't think I get that much action on an offsuit 3 by betting, because the flop was 4-way. So now my opponent starts polarizing and is like, you know what, I think I have a really good hand. So now he's basically saying, I have 6-6, 6-3, maybe a straight sometimes. Basically, he's saying he has me beat. Now, we're not going to buy this, obviously holding a 3. So we call, river's an 8. doesn't improve our hand. But also we were not drawing dead, but we were drawing really thin against the value on the turn anyway. If he has 6-6, we're obviously looking really bad. And if he has 6-3, don't have any outs either. But at the same time, man, it's really tough to pick up those sixes, you know? It's really tough to have pocket sixes when you cold call the cutoff. Sometimes you have Jack, 6-6, and in this situation, obviously, you know I'm going to win the hand. Sometimes you just got to call down, especially if you play against capable and aggressive players. So we call. And we end up winning against the 8-7-6-4. My opponent turning a 6 into a bluff. And I would say, in general, I would be really careful doing this just because you have to consider your preflop range. And your preflop range just doesn't have 6-3, 6-6, or deuce 3 that often in there. So it's definitely an ambitious play. And this time, it didn't work against Nizzles, which is good for us. Let's head over to the next hand. Otherwise, this video will be an hour long. Okay, so in this hand, we're playing 25-50. Let's speed this a little bit up. 2x. We see a 3x open and a call. This is a hand that you can... Well, let's have a quick look into the solution here. If we look into an under the gun open and a call, I would say by default, this is a little bit tricky, like a little bit close. So by default, we just want to call with these combos. The thing, though, is these guys have very wide ranges. So we could assume something along the lines more of like an MP and cutoff call. Like, I think their ranges are even wider than that, to be honest. But you can see if we have an ace and a king high suit, so you can make the ace high flush and the king high second flush. So the ace and the king have a different suit. Then those hands will become pure 3-bets against the MP and cutoff range. This MP range here is about, what is this, like 20%? If we look into it for a moment, this range is supposed to be 23%. I think that the players and the ranges in play, though, like if we go back quickly to this hand, this player has a 50% VPIP, and this player has a 32% VPIP, and he's also aggressive when it comes to open racing. So I do think that these ranges are actually quite a bit wider. And we're working with something like 30% and then a button cold calling range, you know, something along the lines of like a 20% plus. And we have to, so I think using the small blind 3-bet squeezing range is a little bit more appropriate for the spot. And it's always important to consider what's the GTO and also how my opponent's actually playing and in which way can we exploit that. So I think this is a good squeeze, but it's certainly on the lighter end when it comes to the baseline strategy. And we do see 2 calls. Flop is amazing, top pair, not flush draw, and also a gutter. I think on this flop, given that I'm in position and I'm not going to just like bet, if you consider the stack sizes, like we still have an SPR of 3, an SPR of a little bit more than 2. And because it is multi-way, I think that we can justify a small sizing here, something like 700. But at that time, I was playing more like half pot. And I think that's okay. The thing that's a little bit tricky here is that unfortunately we have the ace and the king of clubs, which hurts us obviously because no one can have the king high flush draw. Turn is a 5. And now on the 5, we might think, well, maybe it's time to slow down. We are going to lose against ace 4 and 4-6. But I think the reality is we have the best hand here extremely often. It's not like ace 4 is going to call $1,000 on the flop, like half pot, like that often, unless it has a flush draw, which we block. I mean, ace 4 of clubs is jamming anyway, I would think. So I'm not too afraid of a straight. Not afraid of a set. I think my opponent is going to have a jack, maybe backdoor diamonds alongside, a hand like king, 5-6, maybe a hand along the lines of a flush draw. And I want to get value, but if I bet pot on this turn, a lot of these hands are just going to fold, and we don't want them to fold. We don't want king, 6-5 to fold. We don't want a hand like a flush draw to fold, because we have the uber nuts basically against those combos. So I'm going to use a very unconventional sizing here and quarter pot the turn. And the whole idea here is just induce, trying to make him call. And actually what happens is he jams all in. And actually when he jammed all in, I wasn't too happy. I was like, what? Come on. I call obviously, but he does have the bare flush draw, no pair, no straight draw. And we're actually looking at a 100% check mark on the turn already in a $14,000 pot. Ship it, flush on the river for both players, doesn't change a thing. All right, next hand. We have king, queen, 10 at 50, 100. Okay, we see a cutoff open raise. Yeah, I remember this hand. I also reviewed this hand or ran this hand in a sim. We 3-bet. Again, this is a good 3-bet. You're going to be careful against MP. Probably not 3-bet. But again, it always depends on the ranges in play. I put in calls. Notice we started the hand with less than 100 big blinds. And now on this flop, it's very hard for the cutoff to have me beat. I mean, he can have kings, but like some of the kings are folding. If he has kings and diamonds, I mean, that's a real bummer. But it's hard to have 10-10, 10-6, 10 deuce in the cutoff open raising range. I also block A10. So at this point, we're just going to stick it in and close our eyes, hope for a fold. We still get action, obviously, from flush draws. In this case, our opponent does have a flush draw, ace, jack, jack, 8 with the jack high diamonds. Interesting pre-flop call. If we have a quick glance into an open over here, this is now the small blinds strategy. I wish I had kings, but we have this hand. We actually have this hand. Oh, wow. We are actually not 3-betting this hand. I forgot my own review. It's not a default 3-bet at least. It's a close decision with a king high suit for sure-ish. So you can make arguments, but it's not a default 3-bet. So we are a little bit out there. We're a little bit loose in this hand. But again, there are always reasons to also expand a little bit if you think your opponent is light. And you can see my opponent is supposed to raise fold the ace, jack, jack, 8 with a jack high suit. It's going to get into too many dominated spots post-flop in this 3-bet pot scenario. In this case, it works out for him because he has the flush draw and I don't. And we flip on the flop in this $14,800 pot. I think we ran it once. Oh, twice. Okay, he wants it twice. We accept. And we win the first one and the second one. Again, I run pure in this video because we're only looking at winning hands. So it's a cool hand. Pre-flop a little bit light. Next hand, King 997. King 997. Can't even remember this one. How did I get involved? I guess I open raised the cutoff. Yeah. Okay, so here we are deeper than 150 bigs. We open raise and we face a 3-bet from the small blind and we obviously call. So far, so good. Like in position at this stack depth, there aren't many hands you want to consider folding. Like some of the worst ace-x hands with low suits can consider folding. We flop middle set on jack 9-3. Amazing hand, obviously. Sure, my opponent can have ace, jack, jack, but mostly will have aces, some kings, some ace, king, queen, jack. He checks. We certainly want to put out a bet here. Half pot applies a lot of pressure and gives us a lot of room to maneuver on turns and rivers. Given the stack depth, you can also make arguments for betting bigger, but that would sort of lower the amount of hands that you can apply pressure with. But it's fine. Like we could also bet 900, for example. That could also be an okay play at this stack depth. At 100 big blinds, like the half pot size is kind of preferable. My opponent is in a pretty deep tank. And again, we're quite deep. And he chooses to raise. So now obviously you can have jacks, but I don't really think he's going to play jacks this way because it's kind of hard to get action for this amount of money because we're so deep. He could have naked jacks like ace, king, jack, jack, for example, so no straight draw. But also we are unblocking all the queen 10 and 10-8 combos as well as aces. So you can have a hand like ace, ace, 10-8, ace, ace, queen 10. He could have a rundown like queen, jack, 10-9 and so on. And against almost all the combos, we're doing quite well apart from jacks. So there's no way we can fold this or want to fold this even. So I was relatively happy getting the money in. Given that I didn't think he's going to play jacks this way specifically. And we are in a massive cooler situation, set over set here in a 16K pot against ace, ace, 3-3. And this board will brick out in our favor and we take down a nice pot there. Okay, let's move on. I have to like speed this up a little bit at least. Otherwise, we're not going to get through these amazing hands. $25, $50 blinds. We have 200 big blinds. We raise under the gun with a great hand. Ace, king, king, 10. Let's see what happens here next. Let's speed this up. Okay, bunch of folds. Oh yeah, this was an interesting hand. So big blind defense is an unknown, also plays very deep. And on this board, the big blind is not supposed to lead any hands because we have all the aces. We have a much stronger preflop range. That being said, he does lead pot size. And from my experience, it usually means my opponent has a hand like ace queen, ace nine. It usually is a strong hand. Like you won't see people leading here with a hand like 9, 8, 7, 6 or something. Like that would be way too aggressive and unusual. So I expect my opponent to actually have a pretty decent hand, but obviously we have the backdoor nut flush draw as well as the inside straight draw, some setouts potentially that are live as well. The turn is obviously the nuts, the jack of hearts. My opponent now sizes down to half pot. It's time to raise for me if my opponent happens to have ace queen, queen queen, 9-9, ace jack, the nut flush draw. Like obviously you want to get a lot of value from those hands. So now is the time to raise before the river breaks off or scares my opponent or myself. So we do raise on the turn to 2.8k. My opponent makes a quick call, and then on the river we pot it for 6,700, putting my opponent all in. So basically sizing the turn in a way where I can shove the river and stack all the chips. And obviously I could have king king. I could have a hand like ace king king, ace king king deuce or whatever, backdoor diamonds. That is now turning its hand into a bluff. But I don't. I have the nuts, and my opponent hangs for a pretty long time. Obviously a big pot, and ends up making the call in a second with queen, queen, 7-5, $18,669. So was leading with a set and then decided to call down. Next hand. So this hand actually is a hand that I played very recently. I think I played this hand yesterday. Yeah. So this is 50-100 with a $200 straddle. I'm in the big blind with a $5,000 stack, roundabout. And it's kind of an interesting spot. Like, yeah, I mean, no, I'm pretty sure I played it well, but I thought about it and ran some numbers. So pre-flop, we're going to call. It's a little bit dicey because there are a lot of players behind and my hand isn't great multi-way. At the same time, I only have to call 100 to play for the pot. So it's a little bit tricky. You can make arguments for even folding and not even calling the 100 because you will see a raise often. But now things actually happen or unfold a little bit different. We see a pot size raise to my left from another. I mean, it's not a 50 big blind stack. It's more like a 25 big blind stack given the straddle. So when this guy raises to 850, he's going to be very high card and high pair heavy. And the guy on the cutoff, Nordquist, is going to rip over the top. He's going to have aces almost exclusively, like sometimes ace, king, king. And that's really good because we have a hand that is completely untouched by the high cards. Like we have a lot of free cards, essentially. And that is going to boost our equity massively. Like you can't do this with all combos and all hands. And this hand is not so well connected. It has two gaps. There's a missing 8 and missing 5. If we hadn't had these gaps, it would be better. But if you actually run some three-way preflop all-in sims, it's going to be very tough to not make this hand very profitable to get the money in here because my opponent's going to show up with aces and then top 8%, top 12%, top 15%, top 7% or 6%. Whatever number you attach to the guy to my left, like I'm going to have a lot of equity here given the card removal idea. So for 5k, I rip it in. Let's fast forward a little bit. The guy to my left now tanks for a very, very long time. I can actually fast forward this. He had a tricky decision for a three-way pot because he ends up having kings, double-suited kings. Yeah, it was a very long tank, actually. Almost the entire time bank as well. It's almost a 3-minute hand. And the money goes in, and we look into double-suited kings to my left, unfortunately covering my clubs, and then the aces on the top, very standard. And actually in this setup, we still have, I think, 33% equity, which is awesome. There's obviously that money out there. I already put out 200 as well. And again, in many situations, I'm going to have like 34, 35%. If they somehow show up with aces both or each, then we're like crushing completely. But yeah, that's the idea basically. but you got to be selective with the spots where you're going to do this. I have trips by the river, so we're going to win this nice pot here. And actually, the pot size was smaller than the pots previously, but I won more in this. I won more money in this hand because it was a three-way all-in. So next hand, we show up with a beautiful hand, Ace, Jack, 10, 7. I mean, there's a 2-gapper at the bottom, but this hand is still very, very strong. You generally want to 3-bet. You can use this hand for 4-betting as well. And in this hand, we do see a 3-bet from the small blind after I ISO the cutoff. And this is a hand that, like, are we playing 200 big steep here? Yeah. So the default is to call, but my buddy on the left, he is very, very aggressive. Played every hand so far, 100% VPIP. A lot of action, definitely an action player. So actually going to take this hand to war, and I'm going to 4-bet and really just push my luck, you can say, and hope he doesn't have aces or kings. And he just calls the $2,500 4-bet. Flop is ace high. We have 7,500 behind. If I had a slightly stronger hand, I could also consider betting smaller. Obviously, if I had aces, I wouldn't pot. But ace, jack, I mean, we have 2 backdoor flushes and backdoor straight draws. I actually think, looking back at this, I might have gotten a little bit nervous. Sorry, I just woke up kind of. I might have gotten a little bit nervous and decided to pot, but actually not blocking kings. I kind of like the idea of betting something like a quarter or more and trying to make kings come along because kings is drawing really slim. So I think that this is maybe a little bit too big of a bet size for this spot. Don't like it too much. However, my opponent thinks about it and he's going to get the money in. He has 9, 6, 5, 4. So actually pretty good flop for his hand against my hand. He has middle pair and an inside straight draw. 2 pair outs and so on. 20k pot. Run it twice. Yes. Turns is straight. Jesus. We river flush. And king is good for us. And the jack is good for us. We scoop this pot again. I'm very lucky in these hands. That was a good one. Okay, top 3 hands now. And the first one starts with only a 5k stack. Oh, yeah, this is also an interesting hand. So we see an open raise from Ben Villanovsky in the MP. Notice the player to my left is sitting out. We just called, like, some of the worst aces, especially with wheel cards, are generally better suited towards just calling because they are not going to do well on many flops. So you don't want to pump the pot to a 3-bet pot situation. And then sometimes you have a disguised top set on ace, jack, 8. So let's see where this goes. Ben first to act out of position against 2 players. He is the initial raiser. He could certainly get away betting here on the flop with a good amount of hands, but he decides to check. I'm going to come out betting. We're obviously also unblocking a lot of straight draws. Bet 450. It's definitely on the larger end. I can see reasons to bet smaller, but this is fine. We see a call on the button and Ben Villanovsky with the pump to 1900. I mean, he's not folding versus my jam once he raises this large, so it's time to get the money in before some scare cards come around. Maybe he has jacks, and we don't want to scare jacks away on a king or a queen or at 9. So it's time to jam. And as you can tell, based on like how much money we want in this hand, and that's in the top 3, the button will also rip the money in after a pretty considerable tank, to be fair. Oh, actually not. It was pretty quick. Okay, it was a quick all-in. And Ben Villanovsky will also... Actually, they have money behind. Okay, so he jams over the top again. So this is a 25k pot, but I'm going to be playing for 15k. Let's have a look. Ace, jack, jack, deuce, pretty dead. Was blocking aces, though. Ben Villanovsky with the check raise on the flop with the wrap. He has a king, queen, 10 or 9 to a straight and backdoor nut spades. However, he's not blocking any of the pairs, so this is a little bit ambitious, but you can see his equity is completely fine, 42% in a 3-way all-in. It's also because we are unblocking all these straight draws and block our own outs. So in general, he's a little bit worse off, but in this case, given the card removal idea, I mean, he's doing pretty good on the flop, but obviously the turn is golden, and we end up winning a very nice pot. We win 15.7k in this one, and then the 9k goes to the jacks. Okay, second biggest hand. Yeah. Okay, so what are we playing here? We're playing 100, 200, and there's an ante in the middle of 100, plus there is a poster in MP with 200. So a lot of money in the middle to begin with. We see Cantautas with the pot size open raise to 1,000 straight. The real Rambo who was posting will shortly come along. And we have a beautiful hand, ace, king, king, 3, double suited. And we're actually playing 50 big blinds deep. We have, quote unquote, only 10,000. So this is a very, very strong hand in this scenario. We're looking to squeeze. We're looking to get the money in, 4,200. We can make it very big, almost half our stack. So this is a quite straightforward decision for us. Cantautas calls, and real Rambo is going to fold. The flop is really good, actually. We have an overpair, a gut shot, backdoor flush draw. Very hard to be beat on this board unless my opponent happens to have jacks. So we jam in a second. And we will get called. We don't have much to jam. Like, it's a small jam, basically. And queen, queen, 5, 4 with middle pair, 2 backdoor flush draws and a backdoor straight draw and some setouts has a reasonable call. I actually also looked up this hand, and it seems to be fine to call the squeeze pre with queen, queen, 5, 4 double. $21,900 pot. And I think he's going to run it one time, but we're going to cash out. Cash out feature on GG. We have a 76% equity, so we're going to get 3/4 of this pot, 16,000 and something. 16,000 and change. I end up winning $11,551 in this hand. So the board runs out 2-3, and it's all good. And now we're going to get to the biggest hand in most recent times against the man, the myth, the legend, Victor Malinowski, aka Limitless. We're playing three-handed at 5,100. I'm sitting on 12,000, and I am the shortest stack player. We 3-bet, king, king, jack, 8. Very standard so far against the button open. Roughly on 100 bigs, 120 bigs or so. Limitless with the call. Beautiful flop, king, 10, 5. This is a board where we just range bet half pot. So our top set goes in there as well. Although, king 10, yeah, no, it's fine. We're going to go for the range bet for half. If the board would be more connected, like, for example, queen, jack, or jack 10, we would consider also a large sizing choice. But in this case, half pot is good, turn is a 10. So now we have an interesting decision because we are blocking the king, we're unblocking the 10, we're also unblocking some straight draws. I mean, we have a jack, but once my opponent calls, there's a very defined range of straight draws, 10x with a straight draw, king x with a straight draw. We already have 2 kings, so there's a decent chance he has a 10. I'm going to check here on the turn because I think a 10 is betting anyway. Especially, I think Limitless is someone that is can be very aggressive, so you can also value bet Finn because he will get paid off. So I think 10x is betting here quite often, trying to get value from ace king or ace ace. So I check, and basically I imagine I will get value from a 10, but also from some draws. He goes for a very large sizing choice, and when he chooses this sizing, there's not really a reason to jam. He's basically implying he has a very strong hand that probably wants to jam river anyway, and all the draws are drawing that against my hand. So it's time to just call. You can make an argument against a very small bet on the turn, like a quarter, for example, to maybe raise, but not against this sizing. I think it's better to just call. River's a 9, doesn't really change much for us. We are obviously super excited. Sometimes we're going to run into 10s, like quads. That's just how poker works. So Victor tanks for a reasonably long time. And at some point, he will put the money in. And we obviously make the snap call, $24,000 pot. He shows up with the ace, jack, 9-7 with a little bluffski, and we take down a nice pot. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If so, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the like button. That would help me a lot. And also you will be able to see my top 10 biggest losing hands, which will be a great video to make. But obviously sometimes it makes sense, and a lot of the times it makes sense to look into the biggest hands you lost as well. So we're going to share those as well. And I will also make a bonus episode about the biggest 5-card hands that I've played as well. If you're interested in this content, make sure to subscribe. See you in the next one. I'm over and out.